We resume in AJ's gym, with Red about to challenge the informal gym leader. The stakes? Red's champion title against AJ's right to continue training Pokemon. The battle begins with Red bringing forth Saw, while AJ chooses his Sandshrew. At once, AJ recognizes the unfavorable type matchup, but Red tells him he can bring out another Pokemon if he wants. AJ raises Sandshrew's ball to return it, but Red says that wasn't what he meant. He can use several Pokemon at once if he desires. In fact, why doesn't AJ bring out all his Pokemon now, since it won't change the outcome of this battle? AJ scowls at being talked down to, but says if Red wants to lose so fast, then fine by him, but he should know that each of his Pokemon has undergone the same rigorous training as Sandshrew, and are of similar level. Red is unimpressed, and asks if AJ is going to bring them out, or if he has to waste time demolishing AJ one Pokemon at a time. This sets the green head boy off, and he hurls 5 other Pokeballs, bringing out a Beedrill, a Butterfree, and 3 Rattata, who he commands to join Sandshrew in a full frontal assault on Venusaur. The 6 Pokemon then let out a collective war cry, and rush towards Saw, who stays stationary, an almost bored look on its face. However, when they get close, Red gives a single quiet command, now, and his Pokemon's eyes come alight. At frightening speed, green energy begins to coalesce around Saw, and from the ground, 6 thick roots burst forth and wrap tight around AJ's Pokemon, immobilizing them. Red then gives the boy a stern look, saying this is his last chance to surrender, in a surprise twist, addressing him with empathy rather than anger, as he adds that the mark of a wise trainer is knowing when to walk away from a fight, something it took him far too long to learn. However, AJ is insistent that the battle isn't done, and snaps at Red to stop talking down to him, before bellowing at his Pokemon to break free. Loyally, his team of 6 struggle with all their might, but none are strong enough to resist a champion's frenzy plant. With a sigh, Red tells AJ that he really hoped it wouldn't come to this, but sometimes seeing is believing, and so instructs Saw to wrap things up. Saw growls its assent, then retracts its roots back into the dirt, causing all the bound Pokemon to hit the ground with such force that each impact rings out like a crack of thunder and shatters the ring beneath it. When the final root disappears from view, there are 6 craters left in its wake, and at the center of every one is AJ's Pokemon, unconscious and looking more battered than the green-haired boy has ever seen them. With a gasp, AJ falls to his knees, utterly shocked by the swift defeat he has suffered, while Red returns Saw to its ball and approaches him. In a hard voice, Red states that AJ lost, and as per their deal, he must now release all 6 of his Pokemon. That is, unless he can think of a reason why he shouldn't have to. However, instead of giving any form of cohesive argument, AJ instead begins to weep, pleading with Red not to take his Pokemon away, since they're his best friends and he loves them. Red gives a disbelieving little sniff and asks how AJ can truthfully call them his friends when he whips them and demeans them, to which the younger man looks up at him with red-rimmed eyes and says that he just wanted to help them achieve their full potential, but swears that if Red ever gives him a second chance, he'll never do any of those things again. He then breaks down in tears once more, pleading that he's sorry. This makes Red's lip twitch, and he says that AJ shouldn't be apologizing to him, he should be apologizing to his Pokemon. After all, he'll need to rebuild trust for the next leg of their journey together. For a moment, AJ looks up at Red with confusion in his eyes, before something finally clicks and he rises to his feet, thanking the champ profusely for this second chance. Red chuckles that he shouldn't thank him yet, since AJ is going to be coming with them, so he can keep an eye on him for a while and make sure this lesson has really sunk in, and if he still has any doubts, then AJ can kiss that trainer license of his goodbye, so he should consider himself on Pokemon probation. Ash gives Red a look, as if questioning whether he really has the power to do any of this, but Red just winks at his protege, as if telling him not to say anything, as a still overjoyed AJ continues to thank Red, and vows that he won't let him or his Pokemon down. The rest of the day is spent assembling AJ's gym, and making provisions for most of his Pokemon to be sent back to his parents in Unova, since he has decided to start over fresh, with just his Sandshrew, like he did at the beginning of their journey. Red approves of this attitude, and so he and Ash help, working late into the night. Though even after all this is done, Red still doesn't allow Ash to shirk his nightly training. He also instructs AJ that from now on, he will receive nightly drills as well, something AJ is more than happy with, being used to rigorous training. And so AJ quickly agrees, and as he does so, he refers to Red as Master Red, which makes the older man blush a bit, and he tells him that just Red is fine. Nonetheless, when Red tells Ash and AJ to have their Pokemon spar, AJ proudly declares that though Ash is Master Red's first apprentice, he will be his best, a challenge that Ash eagerly accepts, asking AJ if he is up for a Sandshrew rematch. AJ smiles that the other boy read his mind, and so the two ground-type rodents go for another round. This time, Ash's Sandshrew fares much better, since Red has instructed AJ to stop relying on one-hit KO moves like Fissure, but the outcome is still the same, with Ash's Sandshrew falling before AJ's. As the two students shake hands, Red steps in, having observed the battle with his keen eye, and asks AJ why he hasn't evolved his Sandshrew, since it's clearly over the level it needs to be to evolve. AJ smiles that though this is true, his Sandshrew wants to become the best Sandshrew in the world before it sets its sights on becoming a Sandslash. Otherwise, it feels like leaving a job half done. Red ponders this and nods that he can understand the thinking, and if that is Sandshrew's goal, then AJ should look into getting his hands on an Eviolite. AJ asks what that is, and Red explains it's a rare stone which strengthens unevolved Pokemon. AJ says that sounds awesome, while his Sandshrew pumps its little fists in a show of matched excitement. The next morning is a misty one, and so the trio stick close together as they wander through an uncharted forest area. As a result, they all spot the ring of candles at the same time, and so go to investigate. What they find is a group of boys tormenting a smaller boy by forcing him to run on a treadmill while answering questions about Pidgey. Like in canon, Ash breaks this up, though this time he is backed up by AJ and Red. Red in particular cuts a striking figure, both as an adult man among children, and because everyone there knows who he is and what he can do. The group of bullies promptly scatter, and as the fog lifts, Ash and Co tend to the bullied boy. He meekly introduces himself as Joe, and tries to justify the actions of his cohort, calling it tutoring, and explaining that he is a student at Pokemon Tech. Red coldly suggests that if that is what counts as tutoring at the school, then it might be time for Joe to drop out. Joe mopes that sometimes he wishes he could, but his parents paid so much for him to attend that he can't let it all go to waste. But Red smiles that this can be fixed, before marching towards the campus, and telling the three boys to follow him. It does not take the champ very long to find the headmaster's office, and when he enters, he is given an overly warm and obsequious welcome, suggesting the rumour of his arrival had preceded him. The headmaster then asks how he can help the famous Red, to which Red bluntly states that he wants the old man to refund Joe's tuition immediately. This startles the headmaster, who blusters that he can't go around giving money back. After all, this is a private school, and even if Joe is just a beginner, he still has received plenty of knowledge from his studies, and it wouldn't be fair to expect the school to receive no compensation for all that it has done for the boy. This angers Red, who snarls that all the school has done for the boy is turn him into a downtrodden wallflower, and if anyone deserves compensation, it's Joe. However, he suspected the old bureaucrat would take this sort of stance, so he came prepared with a compromise. Much more coolly than before, the headmaster asks what Red has in mind, and the champion says he will do a guest lecture here today. He adds that his fee will be the entirety of Joe's tuition, plus 10% to make up for all the bullying the school has failed to prevent, paid to his family at once. Weakly, the headmaster tries to talk Red down to half of the tuition fee, but Red holds firm, saying that unless the headmaster accepts these terms, he walks out that door and costs the school a PR opportunity worth far more than one boy's school fees. This appeal to both are confronted by a pretty girl with a supercilious look on her face. Coyly, she says that it's a real shame Joe's washing out, but she supposes not everyone is cut out for excellence. Joe mumbles something, but Ash steps in for him once more, saying that if this sort of treatment is what she considers excellence, then she's dumber than a slowpoke. This infuriates the girl, who demands just who this kid thinks he is, to which Ash replies that he's Ash from Pallet Town, with AJ backing him up and saying that he is the original disciple of Master Red. Ash gives his companion a look that plainly asks him to knock off the whole Master Red stuff, but the damage is done, and the girl suddenly has become a lot more interested in Ash. She explains that her name is Giselle, and she is the top student in the beginner class, making her almost as strong as a trainer with 4 badges. Before demanding to know how many badges Ash has, Ash admits that he only has 1, but he's stronger than he seems thanks to all his extra training. Giselle sneers that she'd like to see that for herself, and so challenges Ash to battle. Ash accepts, and so brings out Pikachu, while Giselle brings out her Cubone. When Giselle sees Ash's Pokemon, she guffaws that Pikachu is a terrible choice against her ground type, and on top of that is more fitting for a little girl's pet than the starter of a champion's apprentice. This angers Ash and Pikachu both, with Ash telling Pikachu to attack, However, thanks to Red teaching him type matchups early in their adventure, and him having a ground type of his own, he knows better than to use any electrical attacks, and so instead has Pikachu perform a quick attack. This connects, and sends Cubone reeling before it can right itself and hurl its bone at Pikachu. Once more, Red's tutelage pays off, with Pikachu using what Red and Saw taught it about evasion to leap over the Bonemerang and execute an aerial quick attack, which strikes Cubone on the top of its skull. It then brings its tail around and slaps it into the side of Cubone's head, causing the skull to spin around and the Pokemon to collapse in a heap at the same moment that its bone clatters to the dirt. Pikachu then stands victorious over its foe, having not taken a single hit. Giselle and Joe are both stunned by this strength, especially by someone who's doing his journey the primitive way, but Ash tells them that by travelling with Pikachu and his other Pokemon, he's formed a bond, and that's far more valuable than anything that can be learned here. Both students think hard on this, before Giselle approaches Joe and says she's sorry for all her mistreatment, and she will miss him when he's gone. Joe in turn blushes that maybe they can meet again at the Pokemon League, since he's going to start travelling around and earning gym badges just like Ash. Giselle wishes him luck, and after this, as promised, Ash and AJ, along with Giselle, help Joe pack up his dorm room, with the two Pokemon Tech students pestering Ash to tell them all about his adventures up to this point. With a touch of embarrassment, Ash does his best to recount everything that's happened since meeting Red, and to his shock, they both hang on his every word. Soon it comes time for the four children to attend Red's lecture, where he dissects his championship battle with Blue all those years ago. It is a fun and engaging presentation, and to everyone's delight, he even has a video phone wheeled in, so that Blue can give his perspective. Though admittedly, the two old friends do get a bit off topic, bickering about who gave a better overall showing at the league. As a result, the class lasts for 3 hours, and dusk has fallen by the time Red is ready to leave. At the front gates, the trio see Joe, and AJ asks if he wants to come with them to Saffron City. However, Joe politely declines, saying that he wants to retrace Ash's steps, and so he's heading in the opposite direction. The trio wish him luck, and so head their separate ways, promising to meet again someday. The next few days pass uneventfully, with Red and his knowledge of the Kanto region keeping them on track to Saffron City. Though, around midday, several days after leaving Pokemon Tech, the trio spots something that looks like a giant lit candle sticking out of the ground. Having a bad association with candles after their last experience, they rush in to investigate, but find it's actually a Charmander sitting on a rock. Neither having a starter Pokemon of their own, Ash and AJ both run up to Charmander, admiring everything about it from its sleek domed head to the claws on its feet. However, when AJ reaches out to pet it, he quickly pulls his hand back, saying that even for a fire type, this Charmander is hot, and he thinks it's burning with fever. Hearing this, Red steps in and says he'll check, pulling a thermometer from his pack and holding it out for Charmander. However, Charmander rebuffs this advance, turning its head away from the humans. Pikachu then leaps onto the rock and tries to reason with the fire lizard, but even this Charmander refuses to listen to, going so far as to snarl at Pikachu, causing Ash to snap at Charmander to leave his friend alone. But Red puts a hand on his apprentice's shoulder, saying that Charmander is probably delirious, and so the best thing they can do is alert Nurse Joy, and perhaps she'll be able to shed some light on the situation. Ash and AJ agree, and so the trio leave Charmander in peace. That night, they finally arrive at a Pokemon Center, and while Red goes to check their Pokemon in, Ash and AJ agree to head to the dining area and find a table for them. As they sit down, an obnoxious male voice near the fire pit fills their ears. And to make matters worse, the speaker is bragging about how he finally got that wimpy Charmander to leave him alone by ditching it on a rock and lying that he'd come back for it. The speaker and his friends laugh, as though this kind of abuse is funny, with a few even praising the speaker whose name is Damien, and asking if they can use that trick on some of their weaker team members. This pushes Ash over the edge, and he rises from his seat as if he means to clobber Damien, but AJ steps between him and the blue-haired braggart and asks his friend to let him handle this. Ash agrees, so AJ steps towards the fire pit and approaches Damien with a stern look in his face. When he sees AJ, Damien coldly asks what he wants, and AJ replies for Damien to go get his Charmander, since it's sick with fever, still waiting for him on that rock, even now in the rain. He then adds that he knows Damien made a bad choice, but that doesn't mean he's a bad person if he learns from it, offering to come with Damien and help him find his Charmander in the storm before extending a hand of friendship. Damien doesn't hesitate before slapping the hand away and telling AJ to buzz off, since what happened to Charmander is none of his business. This enrages AJ, who grabs Damien by the shirt front as Ash leaps to his side, ready to battle all of Damien's friends if need be. However, before a fight can break out, Nurse Joy with Red at her side barges in and orders them to break it up. After Red nods to show his support for the nurse's orders, AJ shoves Damien back into his seat and snarls that if Damien isn't going to do the right thing, he will. He then storms out the door, with Ash at his heels, and Red right behind them, confused but having good enough instincts to trust his students. Having had no time to get wet weather gear, the rain pelts heavily on the guys as they rush to Charmander's rock, but what they see makes them glad they got here as soon as they did. Charmander is huddled in on itself, with a leaf over its tail to prevent it from going out. All three of them know that if that happens, it will be fatal for Charmander, and so AJ, who arrives first, is the only thing he can think of, pulling Charmander in close to his chest to keep it warm. Deliriously, the Pokemon thrashes, but after several days on the rock, it is too weak to resist, and so allows AJ to hold it. Ash and Red soon catch up, with Red confirming that its fever has gotten even worse, and taking off his cap and putting it over Charmander's tail as a makeshift umbrella, while Ash throws his vest over Charmander's back to act as a raincoat. Huddled together to protect Charmander, the group's return pace is slightly slower, but thanks to their teamwork, they are able to get it back to the Pokemon Center before it is too late. Once they're inside, AJ breaks away from the others and makes a beeline for the front desk. Ash tries to follow, but Red tells him that AJ can handle this, and it's about time he explains what happened with that blue-haired kid and what it has to do with Charmander. Ash begins to debrief Red on their encounter with Damien and his confession of abandoning Charmander. As the story progresses, something shifts in Red's eyes, which at first Ash takes to be fury at Damien's callousness, but on further inspection, he can see that while rage is present, it is also tinted with sadness, and the shadow of that hollow look from Viridian Forest. When the story ends, Red forces his composure to return, and says he's gonna have a talk with Damien right away. Ash offers to help him find the other boy. However, despite a thorough combing of the center by Ash and Red, they cannot find hide nor hair of Damien or his friends, and so when the clock strikes midnight, the duo agree to retire to their room and ask after him in the morning. When morning comes, Ash sees that AJ hasn't returned to their room yet, and so heads down to the ER, where he finds his friend asleep in a chair. However, the bed he's watching over is surprisingly empty. When Nurse Joy comes in, Ash asks why this is, and Joy tells him that Charmander made a full recovery overnight, and so left earlier. Knowing what this really means, he next asks Joy if she knows where Damien is, and the nurse explains that he left about 10 minutes ago, though she hopes he and AJ don't plan on starting another fight like last night. Ash nervously grins that, of course they don't, before shaking AJ awake and filling him in on Damien and Charmander's positions. AJ's jaw sets, and he declares that he's going after Charmander, and will show it Damien as a scumbag if it's the last thing he does. Ash nods his agreement, and as he steps into the room, Red says that he might have just what AJ needs, before tucking a small red object with white trim into his pocket. Collecting their Pokemon, the trio set out towards Charmander's rock again at a brisk pace. However, before they come across Charmander, they find Damien strolling along and whistling a happy tune. Stepping up to the blue-haired young man, Red casually asks if he's Damien, and when Damien confirms this, all pretense of affability drops, as Red orders the boy to go get his Charmander right now, or else. Damien crows or else what, jeering that he's not going back for that loser Pokemon, and he's not afraid of some old guy either. Red doesn't reply, but a look akin to what he gave AJ before their battle only cold crosses his face, and he reveals a Pokeball in his offhand and throws it to bring out Saw. Cockiness curdling into panic, Damien asks what's going on here, but Red just looks past him to Saw, who he orders to hold the boy still. At once, Saw's vines whip out and bind Damien's arms to his side, before lifting him off his feet. Red then demands to know if he even cares that Charmander almost died last night, and certainly would have if they hadn't come to his rescue. However, instead of showing any sign of remorse or sorrow, Damien just barks at Red to let him go or he'll call the cops. This seems to frustrate Red, and he growls that if that's the case, he should at least make it worth the police's time. Luckily, he's seen Saw's solar beam uproot whole groves of trees, so he can only imagine what it will do to a human body. At once, a sphere of white light begins forming atop Saw's flower, causing Damien to scream and try to break free. This crosses a line for Ash, who walks towards Red to tell him that even if Damien is a scumbag, this has gone too far. But AJ stops him with a hand on his shoulder, asking if Ash can't see what Red is doing. At first, Ash is confused, but AJ's words allow him to recontextualize the situation, and he realizes that though the specific circumstances aren't the same, he has seen Red pull this trick before. This calms his discomfort a little, but all the same, he and Pikachu share a look that says if this goes much further, they may have to intervene. Meanwhile, Damien continues to thrash around in Saw's hold, causing Red to bark that Charmander tried to do the same when AJ came to save it, but it was too weak, since it had spent so long in the elements waiting for him. This makes Damien stop moving, as an unreadable expression crosses his face, and briefly, hope swells in red. But then Damien crushes this, as he screams for Charmander to come save him. As a livid scowl crosses the champ's face, he calls Damien a cowardly piece of filth, saying he has no right to treat Charmander the way he has and expect its loyalty to remain intact. But unfortunately here, Red is proven wrong, as an all-too-eager Charmander comes padding up the path at Damien's call. Damien then chuckles that the tables have turned, ordering Charmander to torch these fools and save him. Then they can go back to the way things were before. For a moment, Charmander's eyes light up at this offer, but when it sees that it must attack the people who saved it, it falters. Seeing Charmander's wavering, Red kneels down and tells it not to sell itself so short and return to a jerk who only sees it as a weapon, suggesting that had Damien not been tied up, Charmander never would have heard from him again. Damien calls Red a liar, saying he was just on his way to get Charmander, but Red growls that Damien is the liar here, before pulling out the object that he tucked into his pocket back at the Pokemon Center. He then explains that this is called a fame checker, and among other things, it lets him take recordings of people. Red then gives Damien a firm look, offering him one last chance to be honest with Charmander. But when the blue-haired youth just scowls, Red shakes his head and turns an apologetic expression to Charmander as he presses the play button. At once, Damien's voice rings clearly from the fame checker, repeating his earlier claims that Charmander is a loser and that he's never going back for it. Tears swim in the little lizard's eyes, and Red sighs that he's sorry that Charmander had to hear that, but it deserves to know the truth, and most of all, deserves a trainer who truly loves it. He then adds that in fact every Pokemon deserves that, so he'll be taking the rest of Damien's team for good measure. Damien yells that he wouldn't dare, but Red doesn't deign to respond, pulling Damien's Pokeball belt off and causing his pants to fall down around his ankles, exposing heart boxes. Seeing Damien in such a pathetic state finally makes Charmander's mind up for it, and it begins to charge a flamethrower in its mouth. Damien cackles that he knew nothing Red could do would break Charmander's loyalty, and that these losers are gonna pay for trying to turn Charmander against him, but then stops, as the flamethrower scorches his face and makes him scream. When it's done roasting Damien, Charmander runs up to AJ and hugs his leg, seemingly having taken Red's words to heart, and remembering all he did for it last night. The green-haired youth pats his head fondly, while Red hands over its ball from Damien's belt, before releasing the rest of the Pokemon, and urging them too to go find a trainer who will treat them with respect. Damien screams for his Pokemon to return to him, but one by one, they wander away, leaving their former trainer high and dry. When the howling gets too much for Red, he barks at Damien to be silent, before telling Saw to throw this piece of garbage away. Saw rumbles its approval, before spinning Damien around like a frisbee and launching him into the sky. A burned and shamefaced Damien screams that he won't forget this, as he vanishes with a twinkle, which in another timeline would be referred to as blasting off. With this matter settled, Red tells his students to get moving, since they're within a day's walk of Saffron City in the next gym. AJ beams that he and Charmander are ready for anything, before seating the little fire type on his neck and running ahead with it. When Ash and Red are alone, Ash looks to his mentor, saying that had Saw used Solar Beam on Damien, he might have died, and asks if Red really would have gone through with it. Red gives his protege a tired look that makes him appear older than he is, and in a solemn voice he says that he wants to believe he wouldn't, but a shred of doubt exists even now, and that terrifies him. And that's where we'll leave things. How will AJ and Charmander fare together as a team? What surprises await our heroes in Saffron City? And will Ash ever get his hands on a starter Pokemon? Find out when the journey continues.